Hi guys, it's Tracy in Australia and I'm here to share two mini keepsake journals that I've just finished. So they're identical in construction to the others that I've made. They're 4x6. They have 4 cardstock pages which are heavily decorated. Eyelets on each page to reinforce, and then they're held together with these sari silk ties. So let's just have a look at the first one. This is about fairies, and I've used an image from Romantica Arts, which I've reduced considerably in size, and I just loved it. It's this beautiful fairy and these very soft roses around it. And the base for this one is this beautiful quilting fabric, which is very peachy. I've distressed it a little bit, and it has these beautiful pink roses in it. So that's the basis of this page. I've sewed it on, and then I've sewed the image and then decorated with all of these heavily tea-dyed net and lace pieces. Some of them I leave white or a soft cream just for a little bit of contrast. So up here in the corner is one of the frames that I've been making from paper clay. I've distressed that and put the word fairy in it. So this is my first page, and it's actually, the base is music paper that's been torn and distressed, and on top of that, another one of the reduced pages from Romantica Arts. There's this gorgeous bird wearing a crown, dragonfly, and some flowers. A little bit of lace up here. And on top of that, I've fussy cut this little piece that comes from Calico Collage, because I just love the fairy song and the yellow roses. So I made that into a pocket and made a little envelope with a die cut that I have, and into that goes this little poem which says Fairy and Child. So that's from around the 1930s, and it was part of like one of those little girls annuals or anthologies that that used to be published, and this is similar. So it's a little poem about how fairies use dandelions to learn to fly. So everything's been tea-dyed and gone around with distress ink. So this page, you can really see the beautiful rose fabric that I have used here. Lots of layering up here, some vintage cotton lace that I have tea-dyed, and 2 other laces. Down the bottom, a little bit of muslin that's been distressed, and then various bits and pieces, including this tiny doily that's been held there with a button. Up here, a little cluster, some vintage lace, and all held together with a little button. There's some sari silk. So this is a little piece from William Butler Yeats, and it's about magic in the world. And so I decided to put the words dream, imagine, and believe, because you've got to do those things if you want to find magic in the world. All right, on the back of that one, this one, you can see all that hand-torn, distressed card. On top of that, I've laid the music paper and another reduced page from Romantica Arts with this beautiful fairy and a gorgeous, gorgeous blossom tree in the background, and there's lots of little butterflies. Little quote up here from Robert Graves about how fairies live on cherries, which I thought was really funny. And this vintage lace, another little piece of sari silk that's been gathered up, a little piece of tulle, and 2 buttons that I've sewn on. This page I decided to make a little lace pocket, and you can really see the beautiful fabric and the roses. Little piece of lace up here that I've sewn on. And on top of the lace pocket, I put a little bit of muslin in this little doily, and underneath I had these distressed net pieces. So into that little pocket went this beautiful copy of, I think it was 1920s, 1930s postcard. The illustration is by an Australian lady called Ita Rentoff, and she did absolutely amazing illustrations of fairies. The little girl has who's a fairy is skipping with a skipping rope made out of flowers, and there's all these beautiful rabbits and hares down the bottom. So I've just stamped the word postcard on the bottom, on the back. This one is, I found on a library site a fairy alphabet from the early 1900s, and W is for wings. I won't read that, but it's really cute. And then a little piece that's attributed to Shakespeare, which came from one of those anthologies. If you see a tiny fae lying fast asleep, shut your eyes and run away. Do not stay or peep, and be sure you never tell, or you'll break a fairy spell. So obviously the language is modernized. I couldn't find which Shakespearean poem or play that came from, but it was too good not to leave in. So on this page, I've got the vintage music paper, another page from Romantica Arts, just making sure I'm right there. And this is a little poem about fairies at the bottom of the garden. I've laid that onto some muslin, a little bit of gathered lace and some tea-dyed lace down the bottom. On this side, I decided to make a little tuck spot because I couldn't, this was a very big little quote, This was a very big quote and I couldn't get it to work with the image. So I decided I'd make it into a little pocket. Another Ida Rentoff image, again, a girl and rabbits. So that's been sewn onto some vintage music paper, and I've left the top open. The base of the page is the fabric, which I've sewn onto the cardstock. So up here, a couple of pieces of lace, and down the bottom, some netting, this beautiful tulle that has gold thread through it, some lace, some gathered up sari silk, and another little white piece of lace, which you can see another piece of that there. So into that little pocket goes this piece, also from William Butler Yeats, which I really love. Come fairies, take me out of this dull world, for I would ride with you upon the wind and dance upon the mountains like a flame. And I've used that in a couple of my fairy journals, my larger ones, because it's just so beautiful. All right, and on the back, as with all of the others, I've used the fabric, sewn that on, and this little quote that says, some things just fill your heart without trying. Okay, so that's my fairy keepsake. And this one is my latest one, and it's about mermaids, and you can see it's much, much more colourful. So it was a lot of fun to do, but quite different to what I've been doing. So again, I've used a fabric sewn onto cardstock, and the fabric actually has this greeny coloured eyelash trim all over it, and it's quite amazing. I bought a little piece of it because it was just amazing, and I have had it sitting in my fabric stash for several years. So it's out now. This sari silk is this gorgeous, gorgeous turquoisey colour. Everything has been collaged around this image, which is a beautiful image of a young girl as a fairy. And so I've got some different coloured eyelash trim as well to bring in this colour. I've got this gorgeous lace, just find it here, which that's actually off a doily, and it reminded me of the Mermaid scale, so I had to include that. This gathered organza, and it's dyed, it's just beautiful. That was actually a flower, and I've pulled that apart and added it in. So there's another bit of that doily, and then I've got this gorgeous greeny blue trim as well. So I don't know whether you can see, but there are little greeny pink and cream pearls on here, and they're actually called mermaid bubbles, so they had to be included. One of the frames, this one, I have added some silver to it and the word mermaid in there. So there's also some creepy cloth in there, and yeah, there's a lot going on, but I really like how it turned out. So this page, I've got some hand dyed, it's kind of pinky and purpley lace. then one that's kind of bluey, and there's music paper. Then I put some muslin that I had used a very soft turquoise Lindy's ink on, more of that trim, little bit of gathered net, and then these green flat back Diamante things. The image is Ida Rentoff, and I've sewn that on. And then there's a little quote about the sea up here, and it says, "When I slip into the ocean, it feels like going home." It was actually hard to find like poetry and literature about mermaids because a lot of that is quite dark. Mermaids of the Disney ilk is kind of a fairly modern sort of invention. So this page, again, a vintage image, a young mermaid, beautiful soft colors, very kind of 1930s feel about it. Again, 2 quotes about the ocean. I've used a very pale blue color as the base of this page. This gorgeous colored lace. This reminded me of sea foam, so I've used a lot of that around there. And then I've made this little dangle. It's held together by a pearl button. On the back, I've used this page. It's actually a copy of one of the early versions of Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid. And if you've never read that, it's kind of like a very sad story. Yeah, it bears no relationship to the Disney one, although I've never seen the Disney one, but it's a very sad story. All right, this is off a doily. Several layers of lace here, this little blue trim. And up here, organza trim with sequins on it, and poking out of the top, the white net lace. So into that, I've put this little piece, which is actually an ad for Fairy soap, and there's 2 little fairies doing their washing. This is an alphabet card, same series as the one in the fairy book, and this one is M for Mermaid and N for Nymph. This is a little piece from Calico Collage of a young fairy, and she's got a little mirror, hand mirror here, which fairies are often portrayed with a hand mirror and brushing their hair, so which is quite interesting. They were always portrayed as very beautiful, but sometimes luring sailors to their doom. Again, young fairy, and she's sitting on a rock. She's got the mirror held up, and there's a little girl watching her. And this little glassine bag is actually from a stamp supply shop. So over here, this is another image of a fairy with a mirror, and she actually has a comb, and she's sitting on a rock brushing her hair. And in the background here is someone who is a male in distress in the water. So that kind of ties in with that idea that fairies could lure sailors to their doom. And there's a little quote here, and it's from a poem by Alfred Lord Tennyson called "Who Would Be a Mermaid Fair?" And here I've used a lot of the white tulle, just left it and gathered it up a little bit with this silver braid. Up here, some dangly bits of lace and trim, again held together with a pearl button, and all the image has been sewn onto this muslin that I've dyed again with the Lindy's, and there's blue fabric behind that as well. So you can see lots of layers go into making up these little journals. This is another advertisement for the fairy soap, and it's about a mermaid doing her washing, and it's really cute. So 2 little envelopes here, and they both have paper in them, which you can take out. So I've layered that onto some muslin, which I've dyed, and that's a more greeny yellowy sort of color, the same as this organza that's poking out the bottom. This page, I've used an illustration from an early copy of Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid. Very young, beautiful fairy sitting on a rock. There's a little quote here about the ocean. Everything has been layered onto tulle, which is on top of this pale blue fabric. I've dyed the little flower here. There's a pearl and then some eyelash trim and some other bits and pieces. There's a little bit of dye, blue dye down here, and then I've softly dyed some muslin up here, which I've carefully scrunched up and glued to look like waves. The ocean is everything I want to be, beautiful, mysterious, wild and free. So I really enjoyed making this. It was a bit of a departure and I wasn't sure when I started out, but I love how it's turned out. So on the back I did put fabric, and it's pale blue. I have grunged it up a little bit, and around this little saying that I've used on all of them, I actually put some eyelash trim, and just to continue through that very embellished floaty feeling of this little journal. Okay guys, that's my two little journals, fairies and mermaids. I thank you for all of the positive comments that I've had on Facebook when I posted photos of the covers. Hope you've enjoyed the flip through, and I'll see you again soon.